Well, welcome back to Made for Mexico. We're having episode 2 this week. Now, last week we had Aaron on as a guest, and we, introduced our podcast and talked a little bit about, why Aaron and I, moved to Mexico, what inspired us, and what our drive down in life was like. So, the purpose of this podcast is to help you find out if you are made for Mexico. Now, this week, we have a very special guest. We're getting a little more serious. We're talking about the law. So we want to welcome Adrian Sanchez of Lead the Future. So welcome, Adrian.
Thank you very much for the invite, Brent. It's a pleasure to be here and talk about interesting stuff for your listeners.
Yeah, it's really great to have you, Adrian. And today we'll get into the buying process. I, as you know, offer a How to Buy Property in Mexico masterclass, and we get a lot of great feedback about it. But we do know a lot of our clients and buyers and inquiring minds, they always like to speak to a professional or hear from a professional on the legal side of things. So thank you so much for being here.
It's a real pleasure, as I told you. Let's talk about it.
Right on. So before we get into that, Adrian, why don't you help us understand what inspired you to get into the field of law?
Well, first of all, I would like to take us back to when I was a kid. My first inspiration was my dad, because he also is a lawyer. So seeing him as a kid every day pursuing the dreams of his clients and trying to help them to achieve their goals in different fields of the law, obviously inspired me to also get a law degree. And well, that was my first inspiration.
Oh, right on. So it's basically not that you're in a family business, but it was bred into you from your family and looking up to your father. That's really nice.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then I had a chance to study in one of the most prestigious universities in Mexico, that it's Iberoamericana University.
Okay.
So
where's that university, Adrian?
In Mexico City.
In Mexico City.
And also early in my career, I had a chance to get in contact with international investors, and that's why I realized that the field that was most suitable to me was the real estate sector.
Oh, good. Good. And that's why we have you here today. Yeah. Well, as a guy who maybe has a lot of anxiety at times and stress in his life, I was always taught to look at things on the lighter side and not take myself too seriously and not take life too seriously. And it's helped me be successful, I guess, in life, or what I believe to be successful. So I'm just going to lead out there. Who do you think, people hate more, the profession? Is it realtors or is it lawyers? I just thought I'd throw that joke out there, but we all know lawyers are worth their weight in gold, and when we need them, we need them badly. And so I just thought I'd tease you a little bit there. So Adrian's firm, Lead the Future, as he's mentioned, provides real estate services. I know we've hired you on many occasions, and we've helped out with our clients on many occasions. So I have one question for you right now, Adrian. One simple question is, can foreigners buy property in Mexico?
Let me answer that question, Brent, for you and all your listeners. The answer is absolutely yes.
Absolutely.
Foreigners can purchase properties in Mexico.
Yeah, absolutely yes. And I think why there's a bit of confusion is because there's this restricted zone. And right in Mexico's constitution, it states that foreigners cannot own 50 kilometers from the ocean and 100 kilometers from the border. Sorry, American friends, I'm not going to make the conversion there. But, because of that, it caused a little bit of confusion. My understanding is back in the day, Mexico wanted to protect their people's way of life. They didn't want, say, some Bill Gates type person coming up and buying up all their land. But then later on, they transitioned, and they realized they wanted to attract foreign investment. And rather than rewriting their entire constitution, they came up with legal and secure loopholes for foreigners to own. Excuse me. So How does a foreigner own here in Mexico, Adrian? Maybe you could help us understand this a little bit better.
Well, let me talk about this, Brent, in the way that I always like to talk with my clients. First of all, I like to hear from them what is their main purpose for investment in Mexico, Because basically, as foreigners, we have two options. To, as you properly said, set up a bank trust in the modality of restricted zone, or choose to set up a Mexican corporation. But this will depend mostly to the purpose of the investor in Mexico, basically.
Right.
So after that, I hear from them what is their main purpose of investment in Mexico. I can properly advise them which is the best option for them. Because, for example, if we are talking about a retired person that wants to move to Mexico, mostly for residential purposes, they just want to spend some time here in Mexico, I will highly recommend to set up a bank trust in the modality of restricted zone. Because this restricted zone bank trust, it's a very easy way to purchase a property in Mexico, mostly, obviously, to properties located in the coast of Mexico,
Right.
So it's a very easy process because here we involve a bank. Right. And when we're talking about to involve a bank in the real estate transaction, it means double security. That is the way that I used to call with my clients double security. Why? Because the bank all the time will make double check of everything.
Yeah. Right.
So maybe it's a little bit hard to work with bank at some point, but it's better at the end. We have double check of everything, all the documentation, and at the end of the day, it ends in a very successful transaction.
Right. So I think that's a great way to start too, and I like to lead in the same way with our clients as what are your goals for your Mexico real estate and Mexico purchases, and so you start out understanding that, and then you guide them either to real estate trust, which we call Fideicomiso, or to maybe through the company ownership. So two great options for foreigners to own.
Yeah, two great options, and as I told you before, it depends on the purpose of the investor, but basically also we like to mention all the time the benefits from one and to the other option. So, for example, if we are talking about the bank trust in the restricted zone modality, we're talking about also a very easy way to transfer, the rights of ownership from the property to some beneficiaries. Right. Because the bank trust allows you to include at least one or two or three beneficiaries. It depends on the investor. And also, it's a very easy process to recognition of these beneficiaries as the new holders, basically, of the bank trust. Right. So it's a very easy, it's a very easy way to make peace of mind to the investors that their legacy of investment in Mexico will pass to their beneficiaries in a very easy way.
Right. So you've already covered two incredible benefits of the trust. Number one, that if inevitably people pass on, they can have their beneficiaries there. I know as a Canadian, I'll just say, owning a property in the U.S., if you were to pass on, it can actually hold up your estate and cause lots of problems. Where here in Mexico, there's peace of mind knowing right on the trust, you put your beneficiaries there, and inevitably when you pass on, your loved ones, whether your kids or whoever, get your investment. So, a buyer, an investor can really have good peace of mind knowing they're buying something, it's appreciating, and they've done right for their family. They can pass it on with no real problems.
Absolutely. As you just mentioned, many clients come with me and told me, hey, Adrian, I really need the most secure way to let my kids know that they have this property, and they have a very easy process of recognition of legal rights over the property, which is the most convenient way for me to set up a bank trust or the company. So most of the time, for the peace of mind of the client, it's better to choose the option of the bank trust in the restricted zone modality.
Right. And earlier you just said too, something I really liked is having the bank involved in the process. It provides an extra level of security. They've done their due diligence on the property, and just knowing that the bank's involved, brings a level of security to the the
Yes,
transaction.
because each bank have their own internal regulation and different stuff. So we need to pass through a very strict due diligence process for them, where they need to review very well all the documents related with the property, double check everything, and check that everything is correct and aligns with their basically with the regulation. So that it's a double security for the investor.
Yeah, that's excellent. I also hear people commenting they think that the bank owns the property and they don't actually own it, but the bank actually is just administering the trust, right? They're like an administrator.
Yes, basically what the bank do is hold the asset, as many assets that any bank will have. The property that it's been acquiring from the foreign, it's just a holding situation with the bank. But any decision regarding to transfer the property, to will the property, to do whatever you want to do with the property, it's basically on the owner, on the foreign that make the investment in the first time.
Yeah, so that's great information. So just like owning a property in Canada, the U.S., you can purchase it, you can transfer it, you can rent it, and you can will it very, very easily. So lots of benefits there. I remember a story of a gentleman, not to get into it too deep, but he had the trust and he had some problems back in his home country, and unfortunately had some creditors coming after him looking for his assets. But because he owned his property in Mexico through the trust, his creditors actually couldn't get at his property, so it protected him and he retained his ownership that way. So another little benefit. And I like to compare to people, or to help them understand. Most people are familiar at home with a family trust or administrative trust. These are set up to protect their investment back home, and there's really nothing different about that, except in Mexico the investment is real estate.
Yes, absolutely. I think I want to highlight another important point, to left in the table this very important point related with the bank trust. The bank will hold the asset, but the bank will not be responsible for the payment of taxes or duties related with the property. So just one thing to make very clear for your listeners is that even if they have a bank trust, they need to be responsible for the paying of taxes, payment of duties, payment of any situation that needs to be covered from the owner of the property.
Yeah, absolutely. So exactly, again, the bank is there administering the trust, and there is an annual fee that's expected to be paid. What is that roughly? I think it's around 9,000 pesos or so, about 500 US.
Yes, 500 US from some banks. For other banks, it would be a little bit higher. For others, a little bit less. It depends on the bank, but the rate fee is around that amount of money. And as I told you, it depends on the bank. Some banks, for example, used to offer these services of restricted zone modality bank trust in the north of the country. Others banks used to offer the same service in the south. So it will depend the bank that applies for the region that you want to make the investment.
Right. And right now we're, at Bayside, we're using mostly the Real Estate Bank of Mexico, BIM, for our trusts, and it's been working out really well for us. What else do people need to plan for? I guess closing costs is something else for people to be aware of. Most things in Mexico are less expensive than Canada, the U.S., but closing costs are something definitely people want to be able to budget for when they're looking for their purchase. And they're a little bit different depending on the area, right? So why don't you tell us a little bit about the closing costs, Adrian?
Yes, absolutely. One of the most important points in the real estate transaction is to consider the fees. The fees that will that needs to make you feel comfortable with the transaction, either if you are the seller or either if you are the buyer. For example, if you are the buyer, you need to consider the notary fee plus the registration fee plus a very specific tax that it's the transfer of domain tax that you as a buyer need to pay. And well, also maybe another related expenses such as the one of the lawyer fee, maybe another extra little expenses related with the transaction. And when we're talking about the seller side, you need to consider the income tax payment.
Right.
Very important point for your listeners to consider, because in Mexico, according to the Mexican tax law, you will find very good benefits, but you need to be very well advised on how to use them at the proper time that you're planning to sell a property in Mexico.
Yeah, so you're talking about the capital gains tax.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's a great thing when you make money on your property. It's appreciating you make money, but there is a capital gains tax for Mexicans, for foreigners. So that's something, Adrian, at Lead the Future, and I know at Bayside we very much specialize in to help people minimize those capital gains with proper strategies and put more money in their pocket.
Yes, absolutely, Brent. And for sometimes, for example, we used to have this kickoff a conversation with our clients through our service of legal consultation, where them as a seller sometimes they have these doubts regarding the income tax, the capital gains, and everything, and that there is a way where we try to help them, to minimize and also check what could be the benefits that they could get, from the law, and also to achieve their goals, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mentioned this on my masterclass too, and it's, rules change, laws change, everything's always moving in this world, and Mexico's not an exception. Things are always changing, but always consult a professional, to get the proper advice and make sure you're, getting the best for your real estate goals here. So circling back, Adrian, to the closing costs, I think it's important for listeners and viewers to understand what they're facing. So, and again, this can range a little bit differently in the different areas of Mexico, but what are your ranges you recommend people budget for closing costs, roughly?
Well, for closing costs, maybe, as you correctly said, we need to consider in which region of Mexico we are dealing with the transaction. And from that, maybe we need to talk about some percentages, that we used to manage with our clients, that this could be from maybe 6.5% up to 8.5%. It depends on the region, very specifically the region in Mexico that we're talking about, because that is an important point to mention. Each municipality in Mexico have their own right to decide what is going to be the percentage of taxes that will be related with real estate transactions. So that's why I always very clear with my clients. We need to check very well which is the law that applies for the region, and also what we need to consider as a closing cost in this transaction.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know from experience, of course, just there's a difference between Huatuco and Puerto Escondido, which are in the same state, but just difference between the municipalities. So I'll just add, obviously, I think, most foreigners, there's different closing costs they're used to, maybe 1%, or sometimes it's a flat rate. So it's definitely a higher amount here in Mexico. Make sure you budget for it with your property search. And I'll just say though, passing on a little more tax on the purchase, but the value you're getting with your property, if you compare, coastal properties to Los Angeles or Vancouver, you're saving incredibly. So, it makes it all very worthwhile. Yeah.
No, yes, absolutely. As you mentioned, if we compare, for example, the cost and also the return of investment that you can get in a property in Mexico compared to other parts of the world, it's one of the best options to invest in Mexico, basically.
Yeah. Yes. So, Adrian, we often have buyers, they love working with our team. They get lots of information. They love my masterclass and webinar, but they want a little bit of extra security, a little bit of extra information from a legal professional. So I understand you also offer a consultation service, if they're maybe just about ready to purchase, but they want to hear from someone from a legal profession. So you also offer that service.
Yes, one of the main services of Lead the Future law and accounting firm, it's consultation, legal consultation or tax consultation, everything related with the real estate transaction. We, as I told you before, we try to solve all the doubts from the investors before they proceed with any real estate transaction in Mexico. Besides other very interesting services that we used to provide, for example, we also help developers in Mexico, because a lot of investors come with big ideas of investment in Mexico. So we used to help them with different packages for developers, for example, in order to align their projects to all the compliance regulation that applies for them in Mexico, basically, such as other real estate law services, together with some tax services also. So basically, we'll help them from the moment 0 to the moment 100, when everything is completed, and they can say, I successfully execute my project of investment in Mexico.
Yeah, that's awesome. And let's back it up to, let's say I'm a buyer and I'm working with Brian Paschke at Bayside, and I'm asking Brian all my questions, and I say, Brian, I really want to talk to someone on the legal side. So Brian would make an introduction to you, and what does that look like a little bit then? Just average everyday buyer, not a developer, but I'm just looking to answer some questions. So you meet with them by Zoom or in person, or? Yes,
basically we make this introduction through email, and then we propose a date for a kickoff meeting through Google Meet, where we want to, first of all, meet them, also know which is their purpose of investment in Mexico, and try to advise them in the best possible way according to their purposes of investment in Mexico. After that, we prepare tailor-made solutions. We're not a traditional real estate law or an accounting firm that just provide the same service to everyone. We always provide tailor-made services, because each transaction is unique, So we need to make tailor-made services for them that it's completely, aligned with the transaction.
Right.
So that's why we really like to have this kickoff with them, and then prepare all the brochure investment for them with our services, and also the timeline, the execution of the transaction, what could be the challenges that they can face during the transaction, and how the lead team will help them during the whole transaction, basically.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I know we've had really good feedback from the clients we've introduced to you, and so basically you do charge a fee for this consultation, but then that fee is kind of credited back once they do close on the property. You give them a little credit on your closing.
Yes, it's super interesting, that part, Brent. Thank you for putting it on the table. It's very interesting because this first consultation fee that they pay in advance, after that we discuss the service and everything, and they decide to hire us as their legal or accounting representatives, we used to make the discount that they previously pay. So basically, it's a win-win for them, because they get a very good first kickoff meeting, solving some doubts and everything. And at the end of the day, they got a very good discount.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. Yeah, that's great. No, it's a great service you provide. Well, we've talked a lot about the ownership through Fideicomiso and all the benefits the Fideicomiso provide to buyers. But you did also mention another type of ownership was through a Mexican corporation.
Yes, many foreigners have their ownership of properties in Mexico through a Mexican corporation. But as I told you since the beginning, it depends on the purpose of the investment, basically. I used to recommend the setting up of a Mexican corporation, that it's also another service that we used to help our clients with, the creation of the Mexican corporation and everything, all the process, until the corporation is ready to operate. So basically, this option is more suitable for investors that are thinking in a long-term situation of businesses in Mexico,
Right.
So having a Mexican corporation, you will have more tax benefits with your corporation. Also, you will have more flexibility if at some point you want to hire some employees, if you want to purchase some items for your business or different situations related with that principal business, it's where I used to recommend, hey, the best option for you is to setting up a Mexican corporation.
Right. So they can own their property in the Mexican corporation. They can own multiple properties.
Yes, that is one of the most the principal benefits of the Mexican corporation. You can have either one property, but also if you want to purchase at some point more properties, you can do it with your Mexican corporation.
Yeah, we see people doing that maybe that are, want to get into the rental market a little bit more and own little multiple studios or something like that. They can all be owned through that Mexican corporation. Maybe if they want to buy a vehicle, the vehicle can be owned by the Mexican corporation. So lots of different advantages there. I know there's lots of tax advantages with the corporation, with buying and selling through the corporations as well. So
absolutely, yes. Just thinking about, for example, if you're an investor that are planning to have a rental business, different properties in Mexico, and you want to make it profitable for you, maybe the most suitable option for you is going to be to set up a Mexican corporation, because all the expenses related with the business, you can deduct it, at the end of the day for your final payment of taxes. So at the end of it's a very good situation for you as an investor.
Right. So there you have it. Two great options to purchase in Mexico. Fideicomiso, or the real estate trust, or through a Mexican corporation. You have some closing costs to deal with in both of them to make sure you budget for and plan for. So why don't we also talk, I think it's an important subject, the different types of land in Mexico. So, we're here in Huatulco right now. Bayside does business in Puerto Escondido, Mazatlan, Progreso, Merida, and in all of these areas, at least certain parts of them, the government expropriated land, which originally was communal land or Ejido land, but then they privatized it. And I think that's very important for foreigners to understand, is that's where they get the security, is owning property on what's known as privatized land.
Yes, as you mentioned, Brent, I always like to start explaining this topic since the very origin point, that it's the type of land that we have in Mexico. We have two types of land in Mexico. On one side, we have the social land, that is called it in that proper way in the law. The social land, it's divided in two different types of lands, as you correctly mentioned, the Ejido land or the communal land. And in the other side, we have the private land. And when we're talking about a private land, it means that the land have their own public deed title executed by another public and with the proper registration in the public registry. And when we're talking about a communal land or Ejido land, it means that it's regulated by the agrarian law. And if we're talking about specifically to the region of Oaxaca coast, we are going to find out mainly two types of properties or type of lands, basically. Private land, that it's the most secure way for foreigners to invest. I always recommend to double check all the papers in the due diligence period. Check very well that the deed title is executed by another public, that it's proper registered into the public registry, and also have no liens or whatever related with the property. So with that, you can secure a good investment in Mexico.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thanks for explaining that. And yeah, the communal land, as I know, it's just a little bit taboo. Legally, a foreigner cannot own it. Even a Mexican, they can own the right to possess the land, but technically they don't own it because it's part of the community, as I understand. But I will say, as we see the Oaxacan Riviera start to develop, there is a formal process to privatize that land, the Ejido, or the social land as you call it, and turn it into private land that is secure for foreigners to own on.
Yes, absolutely. There is formal processes, including in this agrarian law, that you need to comply with in order to, as you mentioned, privatize the land. And also when we're talking about communal land, we're talking about possession titles. As you correctly mentioned, these possession titles mean that you have the possession over the property. These possession titles, you can transfer the rights over that possession titles, to any persons. But basically, yes, that means that you only have the possession, and the domain over the piece of land basically belongs to the community.
Right. So, yeah, they call that an acta de possession. And
acta de possession, correct.
I know there's a lot of foreigners that do purchase the right to possess the land. People set up companies to do this. It's not something I recommend. I'm not in the risk business. I want everything to be secure for my investors, so I only recommend people to purchase on private land. But some people do their due diligence, and every community is a little bit different, and they feel comfortable doing that. So there is a process to do that. I'll just say most notaries do not recommend it, and I don't really recommend it. But it seems like Europeans are more open to it in general, buying on HEDO or communal land. But I'll just say that there is a big change happening right now, and I don't want to ever compare the Oaxaca coast to the Mayan Riviera because we're very different here. But time-wise, we're kind of at the beginning of the start of the Mayan Riviera. We're at the start of the Oaxaca Riviera, so there's lots of change happening, and the privatization of land is a big part of that. So
yes, absolutely. And in these challenges that we're going to face at some point is the situation that it's already facing. For example, the Mayan Riviera, it's facing a lot of important challenges related with this privatization stuff, communal, the HEDO lands. So at some point, it's something that maybe we will face in Oaxaca too. And the only thing and the only good advice that I can left in the table for this, it's get a proper legal advice before you make an investment related with this kind of lands. Because at the end of the day, you are not putting a cent in this investment, so you need to consider twice to have a proper legal advisor.
Yeah, whether someone's spending $100,000 or $1 million, it's a lot of money to them. So you always want to make sure you have proper legal advice. Yeah, absolutely. So Adrian, this is really great. Beyond, I guess, the ownership and the land, when we have buyers that are ready to make their purchase, I'll just say I know you help set up letters of intent to purchase if necessary. I mean, we at Bayside have our typical templates we use, which I think work in 99% of the situations, but if there's ever something extra, you can provide that service. I know you also provide the service where if someone wants a second set of eyes on a contract, you can look over a legal contract for the buyer or the seller, represent them that way. Is there any other services you'd like to mention that your firm offers?
Yes, for example, these real estate services related with, for example, we call the buyer package. The buyer package where we help the buyer basically to make a double check on the contract, on the letter of intent, maybe on the first due diligence over the property documentation, check that everything is correct, and also that the investor have a proper and fair contract, because basically this contract is the first situation that they're going to face before to execute a public deed title with a notary public. And then obviously we help them with the process to get a notary public to execute the public deed title, and we used to be with them, in all the process of the registration of the title. Another important point is that we also offer in the other side the same package, but now for sellers. If you're a seller, you're planning to sell your property, we help you. We help you to have all your papers in order, that everything is aligned, and also before you execute a transaction, check your tax situation, how you're going to manage your income tax to pay, and also that everything is correct and you don't have any problem at the day of signature of the public deed title, basically, So right. These are the one of the services that we used to offer for investors, basically.
Awesome. Well, those are great services. Well, I think that kind of wraps up our, buying process talk and a lot of your services. So thanks so much, Adrian. We appreciate all the insight you've given us, and I just want to mention everyone, make sure if you're enjoying this video and enjoying our content, go below and subscribe to our Mexico Living YouTube channel. You can, of course, also follow us on mexicoliving.com. Subscribe to our monthly newsletter. We're going to be featuring podcasts like this every week till into the end of the season. I want to thank Adrian so much for being a guest from Lead the Future.
If you allow me, Brent, before we end this episode, I would like to give you this gift.
Oh, wow. You know how to reach my heart.
I know you're a mezcal lover, and also, as you know, my family belongs to this beautiful tradition related with the mezcal in Oaxaca. So basically, this is a gift for you that you can enjoy it later. It's a very delicious mezcal, made it from Cuiche agave, a very special agave, that obviously will make you feel these flavors, these intense flavors, and at the end of the day, you will have a very amazing experience.
It smells delicious. I can't wait to try it out. Well, thank you so much. That's very kind of you, Adrian. So, yeah, it's a family business you're involved in, right?
Yes, a family business, a tradition, something that as a Oaxaqueño, it's something very important for us, make us feel very proud, because now the mezcal in the whole world, it's recognized as one of the most important spirits, So giving you this bottle, it means a legacy, basically, of the family.
Yeah, mezcal's a wonderful drink. As my my doctor tells me, it's the cleanest way, the purest way you can consume alcohol. And I know there's lots of traditions or I guess medical sort of treatments, like a hot toddy. People might recognize that if you're sick, you should have a mezcal before you go to bed and wake up feeling better. And I have some people that have the theory that if you drink mezcal, and I'm just talking sipping on it, it's definitely a sipping type drink, that you start to have very vivid dreams.
Absolutely. And as I always like to comment, a very interesting phrase related with the mezcal that we used to mention, it's for any bath, drink a mezcal, and for any good situation, drink a mezcal.
Drink a mezcal. Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Yeah, very, very big part of Oaxacan culture. For those who haven't visited Oaxaca City, got lots of agave farms and small artisanal people doing what you're doing yourself, is creating beautiful mezcal to drink. So, it's something we've really enjoyed getting to know better about the culture. And I'd say mezcal is really becoming a boutique alcohol that the world is really knowing about more around. So you can go into many places and spend $20 to $40 just on a shot in some of the higher end bars. So
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now the mezcal, it's a very prestigious spirit, in the world, considered as that. And I always very clear with anyone that it's introduced in this mezcal experience. It's at some point you will find the good mezcal for you.
Right.
So don't be impatient. You will find it.
Well, thank you so much for the gift. I really appreciate it, Adrian. And for everyone following along, first off, your Bayside real estate agent can make an introduction to Adrian and his company Lead the Future. You can also follow Adrian on Instagram and Facebook at Mexico Lawyer. Their company Lead the Future. So very happy to have him on here and happy to help you all in your journey, and having him help you fulfill your dreams of ownership here in Mexico. So as I like to say, TIM, this is Mexico, and we are made for Mexico. And we're going to sign off. So, adios.